Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general.
Outlander is the Starz TV show, exclusively now playing only on the Starz TV channel, based on the 10-book-long series of novels by Diana Gabaldon, now in its 6th season on TV, chronicling the lives and loves of the Fraser family, half-time travellers and half-Jacobites finding a new life in late 18th century America. Episode 1 of Season 6, Echoes, actually starts the season with a long flashback sequence back to Ardsmuir Prison, picking up during Jamie's years of lockdown there after Culloden, basically back in the middle of Season 3 if you remember.
Carry on.
And there's a whole load of argy-bargy between Jamie and the other Jacobites, a new character called Tom Christie who's a bit of a sanctimonious Protestant prick, and he's dead friendly with the fellow Freemason jail governor and very antagonistic towards Jamie and the other Catholic inmates. But things start getting nasty and a young inmate ends up getting killed in a ruckus. And Jamie ends up taking a few more lashes and then comes up with a scheme to protect everyone by having them all become Freemasons in the prison. And after that, we zip forward in time and space to America 25 or so years later where, oh look, it's only Tom Christie turning up at Fraser's Ridge. And while Jamie and Claire are off visiting parsley and their mini vegetables, Tom turns up at the door and Roger unthinkingly tells him that as an ex-Ardsmuir prisoner man, he's allowed to settle on the land. And Jamie's not entirely happy about that, but also he can't really say no, having promised land to anybody who used to be in prison with him. And Jamie also has issues with the Crown still asking him to do stuff, only this time it's to be an Indian agent, basically kind of like an ambassador to keep the natives on side in the upcoming war, but obviously he's a wee bit reticent. And after that there's a lot of building, chatting, getting to know yous, like the local widow who's a bit sad, and Tom's slightly shifty son Alan and his adorable daughter Malva, and it's not all happy slappy, there's a few minor cuts and surgeries, since it turns out Tom's got pretty bad hands, and also it turns out the Browns haven't forgotten about the death of Lionel and his men last season, and they show up causing a bit of bother for wee Ian and Alan. And they also make an appearance towards the end during a big hog roast party at the Ridge to welcome the newcomers, because it turns out that Alan's wee powder horn thing that he was showing off earlier on was actually nicked off one of the Browns. And when Christie swears to punish Alan, Brown's a bit put off balance, but he gets his equilibrium and his vindictiveness back and insists that Jamie punish Alan with 10 lashes. So Jamie does, but uses his belt, not a whip. And after that, he accepts the Indian agent job and puts Christie straight about who's in charge on Fraser's Ridge. But things are still bad because you see Claire's still having all kinds of nightmares and PTSD after last season, and she puts herself under with a bunch of homemade ether. Physician, heal thyself. So what did I think? Well, actually, before I get into that, I'd like to apologise because my voice sounds terrible because I've got the flu. There you go. But this was a beast of an episode, and I'd long heard online that this season was going to be a bit different because it had to be cut short because of the COVID crisis and also because Katrina Balfe got pregnant between seasons and understandably they needed to stop so she could pop out a baby. And yeah, they decided to kick off this season with an hour and 20-minute episode, although technically that flashback sequence was about 20 minutes long, so really it was a normal length episode with kind of an extended pre-credits flashback sequence, which was basically its own mini episode by itself. And while we're talking about the pre-episode stuff, one interesting thing I noticed was this season we've actually got a duet being sung over the main titles. Now, obviously, every season they do something slightly different with the music, but this time it's the first time that I think they've ever had a male singer kicking it off. And then I think the regular lassie who did the first few seasons takes over, and then in the end they kind of sing in a bit of harmony, and then he finishes off the song in a bit of Gaelic, which is kind of odd, but it's not bad. And to be honest, I'm surprised they never thought of the idea before of having a male and female singer, because that could be kind of like showing the duality of Claire and Jamie, and that maybe the show really by this point isn't just Claire's story anymore. I mean, maybe that was what they were getting at last season when they had like the big harmony of a cappella voices, but who knows. But it's changes and we'll have to see how it sets. It was a bit jarring, but it was fine. And I'd also like to throw a bit of praise at some of the new faces, like the guy who played Tom Christie, Mark Lewis-Jones. And he's a Welsh actor who's been in quite a lot of stuff. I mean, I remember him specifically from, I think he was in The Last Jedi, playing the sort of general guy, and then also he was in Chernobyl, which is absolutely amazing, playing another general guy, where he was kind of brave and cool. And yeah, he's a good actor, and he's got a nice bit of complex characterization going on here. I mean, it's clear that Christie's a bit of a blunt and pious man. He's kind of petty, jealous, and clearly thinks that he's God's gift. But he also clearly believes in justice, and he also respects Jamie and respects what Jamie's managed to build up, and he follows the rule of what he's told to do. And he's clearly willing to meet it out when necessary, and by the seams of things, probably is kind of a bad dad and a bit of a harsh parent. But yeah, I'm also curious to what the deal is with him and his never-do-well laddie. I mean, clearly the boy is a bit on the wrong side of the tracks and up to no good. Also, just acted kind of weird a lot of the time. And yeah, the wide-eyed daughter, I mean, she seems pretty curious about stuff and seems nice enough, but it's also nice to get a bit of the homestead feel to things. Like, I love the funny bit with, like, the two bugs, the old people and Lizzie changing the table layout. Like, that was a nice callback to Mrs. Bug last season making the bread joke. Anyway, it makes the whole show feel a little bit more like a real world, and it's not just like the Claire and Jamie show, which I've said before. Added to that, we had a bit of Bree and Roger going on, laying out some charity for this newly arranged widow, so some solid stuff, and, a brief turn up by Parsley and Fungus. So, yeah, no, it's fairly solid stuff, off to a decent start. But on the other hand, I mean, I do have a few problems with this episode. The main one being that for the first episode of a new season, this felt kind of underwhelming, and yet at the same time, it kind of felt like that it was utterly crammed with scenes that mostly were fluff and nonsense. Now, I mean, I don't know if this is something related to that, but the opening credits of this season are jam-packed with producer credits, something that I noticed that the Red Letter Media guys have talked a few times about the disastrous Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard shows. Well, I counted them, and Outlander has 15 producers of different flavours credited in the opening credits, including Sam and Katrina and the usual names like Tony Graffia, Matt Roberts and Meryl Davis. But it's not inherently a bad thing, but the old saying, too many cooks? Well, I worry that there's maybe too many producers making this show, and as we saw with Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, this just leads to messy, incoherent shows that are badly made and horrible. And here, well, it's hard to say at this point, but this episode, after the preamble bit in the prison, felt like it was kind of a glut of just a lot of stuff happening, but no real through line. Like I said, I don't mean the Ardsmuir stuff, that was fine. I mean, it was a little bit quick and a little bit thin, but it was perfectly functional. But as soon as things got back to the Americas, it was all a bit, and then, and there was no clear passage of time, scene after scene. I mean, 1 minute it was day, then it was night time, then it was some point later, maybe a day or 2 days or a week, but you didn't really know, and then it was really bitty, and it kind of felt like it was scrappily tied together. I mean, this is possibly just a lot of little bits from the book that have all been condensed, but yeah, like, for example, there was one scene where you literally just met the Christies, and then almost immediately Ian and Alan are out hunting, and it was like, why are they out hunting together? Do they know each other? Have they met? There was no setup of this or anything like that. And I suppose, we shouldn't have to see every single scene of every single thing happening in a show or a story. But the way it was all done felt like all the scenes where they were at that place seemed to be on the same day. And yeah, it wasn't very fluid. Also, we seem to be hitting up against the Claire has nothing much to do problem that plagued season 5. In this case, it was actually that, to be honest, apart from the traditional Outlander sex scene and a wee bit of surgery, she didn't really appear in the episode all that much, and a lot of what she was doing seemed to be more about brewing ether. Now, one thing I would say, ether, I'm not a chemist, by the way, or a doctor or anything like that, but I was always led to believe that ether didn't actually knock you out, it just kind of made you woozy and out your face and feel pain. I mean, think like the famous scene from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
It makes you behave like the village drunkard in some early Irish novel. Blurred vision, no balance, numb tongue. The mind recoils in horror.
But yeah, anyway, Claire appears to be self-medicating, and that's not very good. But then again, so is Fergus. And one interesting thing about that was, the show seems to be portraying Fergus as, drinking too much as inherently a bad thing. And I'm really curious if it's going to show Claire doing it the same way, because sometimes this show can be a bit myopic about realising when one character does something and it's bad, and then Claire does it and it's okay. But we'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes. And I really hope that actually this is all going to be building to a point or something. But speaking of Claire also, the weird nightmare sequence at the end, that was interesting because it all had the snippets of dialogue and things from all different bits of the show. But also it kind of ended really weirdly. Like it just suddenly cut out and then, yeah, I don't know, that felt a bit clumsy to me. But other than that, I thought this week was actually pretty interesting, if a little bit slow. But for an 8-episode season, I kind of hope that it kicks into the story pretty soon, because otherwise it might just be a wee bit slow. And as I said, if the whole season's like sort of as all over the place as this episode was, it's not going to be great. But I'm still hopeful. Last season, as I recall, started out a little bit messy as well, but it came together in the end and mostly it landed pretty well. So yeah, I'll give this season a totally fair shake. But yeah, that's us back in the land of outs for another season. And sorry things have been kind of inconsistent on the channel this year, but I have been hellishly busy with real life work and stuff. And I know that quite a few of my viewers literally only come here to check out the Outlander stuff, so I mean, you'll be happy that that's back on. But I would encourage you to check out some of the other stuff as well. There's loads of stuff, and especially like my film reviews that I've been doing a lot of. I've covered what I've watched every month for the last 2 years. And I know that I'm a bit behind, but again, I haven't actually watched that many films because I've been so busy. But there is a video coming on that soon, and I'm definitely going to tie up the end of Tales from the Loop, and I'm going to tie up the last few episodes of Snowpiercer, and they're all going to be done, and I'll see what's happening after that. So for now, see you soon. Until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.